Now, today's about HSTS, right? Homosexual transsexuals. Before we go there, please go onto my Patreon. Please go onto PayPal. Just put your hand in your pocket for a couple of quid a month, 50 pence a week. What's 50 pence? You can't even buy a newspaper for that. And help us along. Okay? Please. Do the good thing. Do the right thing. Don't be taking stuff for nothing. Anyway, here's the addresses to which you can apply to help. Now, HSTS. I was asked, because I'm involved with another site called Gender Hysterical, as an advisor. They're friends of mine, but I don't take part in the production. I just advise. So, they asked me to do a piece about homosexual transsexualism. What is HSTS? So, we're going to start from the beginning. HSTS. Now, strictly, HSTS is a term that applies to transitioned people, or as it's better to call them, in this case, completed people. How does it come about? Well, it's caused by a thing called sexual inversion, right? Which a lot of people don't like the idea of, but there's so much evidence for it now, it's laughable to talk against it. And what happens is that during pregnancy, while they're still in the womb, individuals, principally boys in this case, may have an anomalous delivery of testosterone, which ends up with them being more feminized across a range of parameters than other boys, right? They're not girls, they're feminized males. Okay? Now it's a big thing, but they are. And most of the HSTS recognize that. So what became most evident about this group of people, and what became the characteristic that was noticed first, was that the males were attracted to men and the females were attracted to women. And invariably the males would be attracted to very masculine, very conventional masculine men, usually older. And the females would be attracted to very conventionally feminine women, usually younger. Right, so their homosexuality, and that was called homosexuality, and their homosexuality became the defining characteristic. People said, yeah, that really defines this class. And it does. They have other characteristics, but it does. That's one thing. You cannot be, you can't be HSTS unless you're homosexual. That means there are no bisexual HSTS. That doesn't exist. Only those who are genuinely homosexual, that is, attracted to, if they're males, attracted to men from childhood, uniquely, no slips, and the opposite for females, those are the homosexuals. You can make all sorts of other different characterizations, and that is one of the reasons why they invented the term gay. But from this angle, from the point of view that we're talking, the scientific point of view that we're talking here, that's the defining characteristics, that they are actually homosexual. Their sexual orientation is such that they are more like, or in fact, really actually are, they have the sexual orientation normally associated with the opposite sex. Now, that orientation is not the only characteristic that is commonly found. There's a list of others, and these include things like digit ratios, which tend to be more towards the feminine side. It's also things like facial neoteny. They tend to have what's called baby face. They tend to be very young looking, and if they don't transition or if they don't complete themselves, they get to be very, kind of slightly beautiful older males. I mean, they're homosexual, but they've got this kind of look, It's difficult to describe, but they don't look like guys, They tend to be slight. If they're tall, most are quite short, but sometimes you get tall ones. But if they're tall, they'll be very slight. They'll be very slender, and very, very fine-boned. You know, I know quite a few of these individuals, and the number that I can just, you know, I mean, Sam, I can put my hand, I can do that, yes, around her ankles. You know, I can't even do it here. I can't even, you know, it's my wrist. I can put the closed fingers around her ankle. You know, and that's absolutely not atypical. That kind of lightness of build, lightness of bones, it's normal. That's what you would expect in a sexual invert, a male sexual invert. They would have these really fine bones, much more like the norm for females. The other thing is that there are quite a few other characteristics. They tend to have rather dry and light, airy voices. Mike Bailey once said you could always tell a homosexual on the phone because of their voice, and actually you can. And you know, a completed sexual invert, that's one who lives as a woman, who's got rid of the masculine pretense completely and lives as a woman. She'll have lightened her voice deliberately such that she sounds like a woman, and she'll be quite convincing. You know, it won't be like, you know, the other class of trans women, the AGPs, they quite often bark. They don't really have feminine voices at all because they were men. HSTS generally have it might not be entirely feminine, but it's awful close, you know, or rather entirely female. It's feminine, it's not entirely female, but it's bloody close, you know. There are a few other things that are kind of typical of this group of people. They tend, and absolutely these things are not absolutes, but they're tendencies, they tend to resemble more closely their female relatives than their male relatives, you know. And quite often you'll meet, certainly here, because there's plenty of them here, you'll meet one and, you know, with her mother, and it's like, you know, wow. And, you know, one of my exes, that family has just so many girls in it. And my partner obviously was a HSTS, and with her sisters, it's like, you didn't know which one was which, particularly her closest sister. They were like twins. The closest sister's a natal woman, Jelly is a trans woman. But you wouldn't know it. I might have a picture, I'll put the two of them up so you can see it. So you'll go, which one's which? That is what happens. The other thing to notice is that when they start taking feminizing hormones, they tend to respond very strongly and quite quickly. You know, they're feminine already, and the effect of the hormones on them is really strong, and it's like, you know, whereas for an AGP, you might have the other type, the autogynephile, non-homosexuals, you might be looking at quite heavy doses to get, you know, a result. With really quite light doses of hormones, HSTS will transition, or they will, you know, complete. The other issue to be aware of with HSTS, with homosexual transsexuals, is that they transition, or they show signs of sex non-conforming behaviour. People call it gender non-conforming, but that's because Yanks don't like to say the word sex. Sex non-conforming behaviour, very, very young. They will be wanting to play with girl toys. They'll be wanting to wear dresses. They'll be wanting to wear their hair long. And the interesting thing is, this might well be in a family with no girls in it. And you do have to ask yourself, how do they know what a girl toy is? If you put a child like this, there's no girls in the household, and you put this child into a room full of toys, it will automatically gravitate to the dolls, you know, and not to the little choo-choo trains. That child will just do that. And you do have to say, well, wait a minute, that isn't learned. Of course it's not learned, it's innate. Gender is innate, but, you know, try telling a feminist that. That will continue by the time they're, you know, if lots of kids go through, you know, little episodes where they're kind of exploring and trying to figure out how they fit into the world, and they might well try being a girl for a while, but it's not going to last a long time. I mean, the DSM says that, you know, you need 6 months of, you know, intense non-conformity to start thinking that we've got a diagnosis here. I'd give it a year. Quite honestly, I'd give it a year. It doesn't hurt to do a waiting at that age. You know, it just doesn't. You know, if the kid wants to wear hair long, bloody let her hair roll on. What's the big deal? Changes her mind later, or his mind, whatever you want to call it. They just cut it off again. It's not, there's no drugs or anything involved. She wants to run around in a dress, so what? Especially at the preschool age, nobody's even going to know. She's in the house. And again, how does she know? How does she know the girls wear dresses? This will, in the genuine sexual invert, this will just get stronger. It will continue, and it will get what is called more insistent, consistent, and persistent. It will be all the time, and it will be insistent. Mum, you mustn't call me that. That's not my name. Now, you know my name's Joyce, not John. Please, Mum, that's my name. And they'll get quite, it's not the question of a child like this being stroppy, because they're never stroppy children. They're always very biddable children. But you know that you'll know you're hurting them. So parents need to be aware of this and keep an eye on it. And if it's going on for a long time, over a year, no change or more intensified the behaviour. When they start having crushes, you'll find that they tend to socialise with other girls. They don't tend to socialise with boys at that age. The boys are too rough for them. They don't really understand the sexual differences between boys and girls, but they recognise the behavioural ones. So, boys tend to be boys like rough and tumble, and they like to horse around and just generally be wild, which is completely normal boy behaviour, and it's high time we stop criticising it. It's just normal boy behaviour, they're wild. Little boys are. The people we're talking about, male inverts, they don't like that at all. They'll feel intimidated, threatened, and they'll just not feel part of it. So they'll tend to gravitate towards the girls. Now, it's not a sexual thing, it's just that, they feel more comfortable in that group. And that, again, is something that will be noticed. People will remark this, and they'll go, that's interesting. Especially if, as soon as this person gets home from school, she's up the stairs and putting her skirt on. Come on. In the modern world, she may well actually want to go to school in a skirt. I'm not convinced that's a good idea. I'm afraid. Not at that age. I think that there's plenty of time to wait. I don't think it does harm to wait at that age. As long as you're supportive in the house, and you're kind of like, I know you want to wear those. I really know that. But look, it's just going to be a lot easier. This is a school uniform. It'll be a lot easier if you just put up with it just now. Like I say, they tend to be very biddable children. So if you do it right, probably going to be okay. But don't try and change them. Don't say, oh no, you've got to stop doing that. Just say, look, maybe it's better if you keep that for in the house. So it's our game to play, not other people's. Okay? Bear that in mind. But this is going to be happening. When they start having crushes, now all children start having crushes somewhere around about 6, 7, 8, 9. It's all, that pre-pubertal period. And changes are starting to happen, even though puberty hasn't actually occurred yet. And they'll start to have crushes. These individual male sexual inverts will always have crushes on men. They will not have crushes on women. Right? So whereas the boys are, falling head over heels for Audrey, that blonde in the class, and she was pretty cute, by the way. Or whoever, or they're looking at this latest film star, it's like, or latest pop star, whoever their name is. Oh yeah, yeah. The girls are looking at the guys. They're looking at men, typically older men, quite often teachers. Men in authority positions over her. She can develop really, really strong crushes. Now little girls do this as well. This isn't not unique to sexual inverts. This is just what little girls do. It's not a harmful thing in itself that a little girl gets a crush, or a little sexual invert gets a crush on men. It would be a bad thing if the man did something about it. That would be a bad thing. Anyway, leaving that aside. When they reach puberty, now it's often said that at puberty they will revert and desist. I don't think that's really the case. I think that what's happening there is that they're coming under increasing peer pressure to desist. And like I say, these are very biddable people. And they're being told that and that they shouldn't appear to be girls. And so because they're biddable, I think what happens is that they kind of turn away. And I think that's a terrible thing. That's a moment they're going to regret that moment the whole of their lives. As they get older, the ones who are more confident, shall we say, it's possible that they're actually more inverted, but that's never been tested. The ones who are more confident, I am a girl, will continue with this, and they'll be perhaps starting to do it in secret. Here, they'll be sourcing contraceptive pills from somewhere. Sometimes the mothers buy it because they know. They go. By this stage, it's like, why fight it? Why fight it? Why cause all this domestic strife? I mean, the dad might really disapprove and might get violent about it, but the mum's like, you can't knock it out of them. You might as well just go with it. So they'll start taking hormones. A girl like that, by the time she's 16, 17, 18, will be really beautiful and almost indistinguishable from a natal girl of the same age. There might be some slight. The one thing that's really telling is, by the way, she may well have slightly larger feet. I mean, I know girls, trans women, now in their 20s, and even older. They are absolutely gorgeous. They're so fucking feminine, you wouldn't believe it. Until you see their feet, boatyard. But the feet, it's a very strange thing because their feet tend to be very slim, long and slender. It's very interesting, So that's your HSTS. Now, the reason I want to say, come back to this, is completion. See, an HSTS, a male HSTS, is actually a girl. She's sexually inverted. She's not a boy. And attempts to make her be a boy are basically cruel and unwarranted, and amount, in my opinion, to child abuse. Should not happen. I don't believe in coercion either way. The person has to find their own path. The purpose of the parent is to accompany them and love them and support them, right? It's not to say, oh, you're going to have to be this or you're going to have to be that. Both are wrong. Transing children, in the sense that you tell children to trans, that's totally immoral. But at the same time, trying to force a trans child, and you will know it, into being something that she's not, i.e. a boy, so that she can join the gay male creep house, that's totally immoral. That's wrong. That should never happen either. So what we say is that by the time they reach a certain age, by the time they're old enough, usually when they leave school, which will be, depending on the culture, will be something between sort of 15 to 18, usually in about there. The young person may well have been taking hormones by this stage, either in the West on a prescription basis, or in Asia, they're just swallowing the hormone pills, the birth control pills, which are handed out here like sweeties. She'll have been on those for a long time. To backtrack a little bit, there was a study done in Cambodia called The Chase Us Like Dogs, and I'll put the link in the text box. And there they identified that one particular group, they were talking to ladyboys, trans women, because they were researching HIV prevalence in this group. And they noted that there were two distinct groups. There was not a continuum. There were two distinct groups. There was one group, and they all appeared, they came out at between the age of 5 to 8. And there was another group who came out over the age of 16. And we're talking about the 5 to 8 year olds, right? And this age thing is really important. They were identified as being transsexuals by that age. And it wasn't just them, it was everybody around them. That one, So this is not just something that happens within the mind of the individual. This is something that is observable by others. And actually, if you see a kid like this, it's like, I've got your number. I know where you're going to be in 15 years. Front row of the pageant, That is the HSTS. And we talk about completion because that's a girl, right? But, it just happens that she was born in a body with boy bits. And when she changes that, when she actually begins to move in society as a woman, as a young woman, as a girl, we call that completion. Because she's left behind all the boy stuff. She's not a gay boy. She's not going to be conned by that. She's not going to be led on by that hokum. She knows she's a girl. She wants a big, hairy man to look after her and to penetrate her. She's probably been playing with her bottom since she was 5 or 6 years old, right? And that applies just as much in the West as anywhere else. You know, I've talked to plenty of people. I can tell you, this is normal behaviour. They like hairbrushes, domestic paintbrushes, the handles of, obviously, this sort of thing, right? These are what we call HSTS, or I prefer sexual inverts, but it has been pointed out to me that, you know, because because these are these are not a highly visible group, because if they're successful, if they manage to get away with it and avoid all the pitfalls, the zookers and all the creeps like that, and they complete themselves as women, the first thing they do is vanish. They disappear from society. They are not going to go to gay bars. They are not going to go to LGBT, whatever, support groups. They're not going to go through anything like that at all. The reason being, they suspect or they fear that they'll be outed. That somebody will go, what are you doing here? Are you trans? And the last thing they want is that. They will build lives as women and nobody will know. Nobody will know. I mean, I've heard stories of women like this marrying and the husband didn't know. And mostly, you know, they tell them before they actually put the ring on the finger bit, but the husbands don't know. They're intimate with these girls and they don't know. Because the reactions, you know, the reactions of a girl like this, an HSTS, sexual invert, the way she comports herself in every way and in bed, she's a girl. She's just a girl. This is not a guy. It's not a man. No way is it a man. It's a girl. You know, and you have to be, you know, basically you have to be Apollonian to the point of the brain dead, you know, essentialist to the level of actually being stupid, to not see that. It's not about the presence or absence of a penis. It's about who she is. And she's a girl. She's a woman. And by this stage, we're talking about a young woman who's completed herself as a woman, and she isn't going to go back. She's not going to become one of the numbers. Not in the West. But it's a totally different thing here. Because, you know, here it's acceptable. It's fine. If you want to be a bakla, if you want to be a katoi, it's fine. It's not a problem. No one's going to give you a hard time about it. Yes, there is a little bit of discrimination, but the discrimination is not like it is in the West. You know? It just isn't. And so, whereas in the West they might really hide, here they're likely to be a little bit more open. But you know, I have certainly, even leaving that aside, I've been in situations where I've been with a group of people, you know, quite often with my own girlfriend. Previous one comes to mind. In company, and you know, you're sitting around, bunch of girls over there, and so the conversation somehow comes out, and one of them will go, oh, I'm a backup. And you go, really? Are you kidding me? And you know, no, I'm a backup. I remember, I think I've told this story before, I remember being in the company of 1, 2, 4 backlogs. One of them I was dating at the time, Jelly, very sweet, in San Fernando, very close to here. And we were in a bar, we just had some food, you know, and we were just having some time. It was like, maybe we'll go and go to a disco or something like that, you know, and hop around like stupid people. And this Australian guy was there, you know. And you know what Aussies are like, you know. So he was going on about how awful, you know, these trans women were, and lady boys, you know, are terrible, man, you know, stay away from them, you know. And like I'm sitting with 4 of them, you know. And one of them, who we are actually still in touch with all these girls, one of them says, wait a minute, I'm a bakla. And you should have seen his face like, what? So the computer is the light now. I'm a bakla. And he's like, and then my girlfriend says, I'm a bakla too. You know, and the other 2, they're like, oh. And this guy couldn't believe it. He was absolutely flummoxed. He didn't know where to go. He was like, he wanted the earth to swallow him up because, you know, he'd been saying all these terrible things about bachelors, or ladyboys as he called them, and there's 4 of them. Because he thought he was talking to a guy and 4 girls, you know, and actually thinking that he might muscle in, you know, because obviously as a single guy with 4 girls, I had too many. He's Australian, you know, they're like that. Anyway, that's what, a bit of a rambling description, but that's really what HSTS, or sexual inverts is a better term, actually are. And I hear my friend's argument that we have to keep this homosexual word in there, although I know a lot of HSTS don't like it. And the reason is because that's really what defines them. It's the definitive issue, right? I said right in the beginning, it's a definitive issue, is they are actually homosexual, right? They're not bisexual, they're not heterosexual. They are strictly and only homosexual, right? And unfortunately, because, you know, there are many trans activists in the West who try to erase this group, who are naturally reserved and try to hide themselves anyway. They try to erase this group and do them tremendous harm. I mean, we're seeing people in the West now who are claiming to speak for trans women. They're not trans women at all. They're not transsexuals anyway. They're autogynephilic transvestites. And it's like, you know, Debbie Hayton, for example. Oh, I'm the gospel on trans. She knows nothing about trans. She knows nothing about transsexuals because she's a transvestite. It's a totally different thing. And so we have to keep that homosexual bit in there because that's what actually defines the people we're talking about. It's you know, there's a whole load of other stuff, but this is the one thing that you can say. It's unique to them. Okay, bye Z, and throat's going. Take care. Bye.